Welcome back to Panda Movie Recaps. Today, I'll be showcasing a 2021 action thriller horror film titled Blood Red Sky. Warning, spoilers ahead. Stay tuned and stay cautious. At an RAF airbase in Scotland, preparations are underway for the landing of a hijacked transatlantic flight. Colonel Drummond is called in to handle the situation, with the assumption that the pilot and co-pilot are deceased. There's intel suggesting at least one person on board is on the German terrorist watch list. As Drummond arrives, the control center communicates with the plane about landing procedures. The plane touches down roughly, and Drummond requests a visual. Movement near a door catches their attention, and a boy descends with a parachute. RAF trucks, summoned by Drummond, approach to extract him. In the cockpit, a new individual is spotted. Drummond warns him via radio, demanding compliance. The man pleads not to be seen as a terrorist and requests to exit the plane for an explanation. Drummond instructs him to climb into the pilot seat slowly, hands raised. Meanwhile, Drummond's translator engages with Elias, the boy, who is in shock. Rewinding a day earlier in a hotel room, Elias's mother, Nadja, prepares for the flight to New York for her mysterious illness treatment. Nadja, with Elias, arrives at the airport, and Elias goes through security. In a flashback, Nadja, at a hotel, drinks a potent concoction before injecting herself. The story shifts to the plane's departure, where Nadja recalls her husband and their baby stranded in a desolate place. On the flight, a disturbance occurs in the front. 8-Ball, an air marshal, subdues an unruly passenger but turns violent, killing a fellow marshal. 8-Ball learns the whereabouts of the 3rd Air Marshal and dispatches a man to handle her. Nadja senses trouble as the situation escalates. 8-Ball, armed, instructs passengers to move to the back. Conspirators join him, forcing everyone to the rear of the plane. In the cockpit, Berg informs Bastian, the co-pilot, about the pilot's demise. They forcibly throw the man down to another level of the plane after opening the hatch. Berg then addresses the passengers, announcing the takeover and ordering them to place their hands on the seat in front. Yuri, a bearded individual, locates the black box and reprograms it. He informs Berg about the successful alteration in the cockpit. The co-pilot maneuvers the plane as Elias expresses concern for his mom. Despite Nadja's reassurances, Elias checks the plane schematics and guides her on finding a hiding spot from the sunlight. Curtis compels Farid to move to the front, while Carl attempts to pacify 8-Ball. Elias manages to escape his seat, prompting Nadja to follow. 8-Ball pursues them, eventually shooting Nadja in front of Elias. He seizes the boy, returning him to his seat under Carl's instructions. Berg meets Curtis halfway, who briefs him on the events. Berg approaches 8-Ball, warning against a repeat and exploiting Nadja's death as an example to the passengers. In a flashback, we revisit the moment when Nadja, with her baby, waits for her husband to return for help. Eventually, she ventures into the woods, discovering an abandoned house with a trail of blood leading to the basement. Inside, she finds her husband dead and a vampire attacks her. She fights back, getting bitten, but manages to kill the creature with sunlight. Nadja wakes up on the plane, alive. Hearing dogs in the hold, she descends through a hatch. Meanwhile, Berg coerces Farid and others to read a message. In the hold, Nadja hides as Curtis and Yuri search for tools. Yuri sets up a bomb, but Nadja attacks him after feeding on a dog. Back with the passengers, Nadja rapidly transforms into a vampire. She hears Berg's call about the impending jump and drinks Yuri's blood to hasten the change. She returns to the plane, creating an illusion that Yuri was killed by the unleashed dog. The hijackers threaten nerve gas release if passengers move and proceed to the hold. Nadja, disguised as a threat, takes Elias to the cockpit, causing panic among passengers. They find out the pilots have left, and Nadja seeks someone who can fly. A man volunteers, accompanying Nadja to the cockpit, while Farid informs others about the message he read. Nadja locks the cockpit doors before Fareed can enter. The hijackers prepare to jump, communicating with their contact. In the cockpit, Nadja continues to transform, urging the man to wait for the hijackers to jump before disabling autopilot. 8-Ball and Berg realize Nadja is alive and return to the plane, searching for her. A passenger discloses her location in the cockpit. Nadja refuses to open the door, instructing the man to turn the plane back to the U.S. despite being closer to Europe. He complies with her command, turning the plane upon Nadja's request. In response, Berg threatens to kill a passenger, shooting him to pressure Nadja into opening the door. He instructs 8-Ball to fetch another victim, and the psychopath chooses a little girl. Berg initiates a countdown, intending to shoot the girl, but Nadja surprises everyone by leaping out of the cockpit, attacking Berg and biting into his neck. The cockpit's door is promptly shut and locked with Elias inside. Nadja consumes Berg's blood and pursues the remaining hijackers as they retreat to the hold. Berg undergoes a transformation. Nadja returns to kill him, witnessed by 8-Ball. She then warns Elias not to open the door and retreats to the lavatory to assess her advancing transformation. 8-Ball inspects Nadja's bag, returning with the hijackers to read from her notebook. He reveals Nadja's vampire nature, but Carl, unaware of the events, doubts the other's account. Focused on 8-Ball's maniacal behavior, Carl uses a UV light to harm Nadja. She injects herself with medicine and delves into a flashback of caring for Elias as a baby while struggling with her vampire instincts. In the past, Nadja encountered the vampire creator's father, who shot her, claiming their cursed existence causes suffering. Back on the plane, 8-Ball crafts a stake, while Carl convinces Bastian that regaining control of the cockpit is their only chance. Elias exits the cockpit, bringing his mother from the lavatory. The hijackers regain consciousness, and the man in the cockpit locks himself in again. Nadja confronts 8-Ball, who burns her with UV light. Elias interrupts, threatening 8-Ball with a gun. The psychopath advances, triggering a gunshot that opens the window, destabilizing the plane. Bastian warns about the limited oxygen supply, prompting Nadja to secure an oxygen mask for Elias. She shoots 8-Ball, who flees. The cockpit's occupant passes out, allowing the hijackers to re-enter. Nadja hands Elias to Fareed as the plane descends rapidly. She pursues 8-Ball, finding him in a bulletproof car. She unsuccessfully shoots at him. 8-Ball injects himself with Nadja's blood despite her pleas. Nadja discovers matches and alcohol, pouring it into the car and setting 8-Ball on fire. In a final confrontation, Nadja recalls the vampire's warning about preventing evil spread. She defeats 8-Ball, ensuring the plane's stabilization. However, the hijackers notice a fire in the hold. Nadja contains the fire and crawls back inside. The hijackers shoot at her, causing a panic among passengers. Fareed reassures Elias that the passengers won't harm Nadja. However, a misunderstanding leads to Nadja being shot. She attacks her assailant, breaks free, and pursues Fareed. Elias convinces her not to kill Fareed, and the other man points a gun at her. Nadja, aware of other vampires in the hold, attempts to contain 8-Ball. Fareed intervenes but gets bitten. Nadja prevents the spread by severing Fareed's hand. Curtis, fully turned, attempts to re-enter the plane, but Nadja stops him. She reassures the passengers, including Bastian. Fareed and Elias convince Nadja to descend into the dark area below the cockpit. Picking up signals from a nearby RAF airbase, the pilot informs the passengers that they were hijacked but have overcome the hijackers. Elias searches for his mother's medicine, and a dying passenger releases 8-Ball, seeking to be bitten by the vampire. 8-Ball violently storms past him, attacking other passengers. Nadja and Fareed witness the chaos on board as passengers swarm the cockpit doors. Bastian, the co-pilot, prevents them from opening the door, realizing that landing the plane would release the vampires. Fareed suggests landing and remotely detonating the plane, but they lack a timer. Nadja volunteers to manually detonate it after everyone exits, explaining the necessity to Elias. Elias, unwilling to leave his mother, descends into the hold to find the hijacker's timer, shielding himself with a UV light. Vampires in the hold pursue Elias, but he manages to avoid them. Elias retrieves the correct tool, heading back to the cockpit. Seeing Elias in danger, Nadja intervenes, asking Bastian about the plane's track. He mentions it's on autopilot, and Farid promises to care for Elias. Nadja feeds on Bastian, completing her transformation. In the hold, 8-Ball claims Elias for himself. Nadja confronts 8-Ball, leading to a vampire fight. Elias attempts to blow out the hold door, and Nadja fights 8-Ball, but he bites her. Elias intervenes, blowing out the door, and Farid turns off autopilot, exposing 8-Ball to sunlight, killing him. Elias feeds Nadja his blood, and she regains control. At the RAF base, Elias seeks Farid's release, but the translator dismisses him. The soldiers shoot Farid, unaware of the impending vampire threat. Elias, sedating a paramedic, escapes and runs towards the plane. Soldiers, entering the plane, face vampire attacks. Elias, witnessing his mother's transformation, detonates the plane as Farid embraces him, surprising Drummond and his men. Farid, finding Elias, shares a final embrace.